All right, welcome back everybody. Today I want to talk about my favorite modification that I've made to my 2003 Mitsubishi Montero. And this is one that gets thrown around a lot. If you've been in the Montero community and if you've been in the Montero world, you hear people talk about gear swaps or diff swaps. Specifically, they're talking about going from 4.3 to 4.9. And you can do a little bit of research on what that means, but basically what that's doing is as you add bigger tires to your Montero, or really to any off-road rig, the gear ratio is going to become less effective. And so the motor is going to be having to work harder. The transmission is going to be working harder to turn those wheels the same way it did the stock ones. A lot of people notice this because their car will start to feel slow or lethargic, or it'll have a harder time climbing up hills. I personally was getting some overheating issues on difficult trails with my 33s. And the all-wheel drive, so this would be over here, 4 high and 4 locked center, those were starting to feel like they were just too slow to actually use. 4 low was okay, but the all-wheel drive, as soon as you hit a gravel road, I mean, you just had to really put your foot down to get it to go anywhere. And so I knew I wanted to do this for those reasons. And it's supposed to help a little bit with gas mileage too. Your motor's working a little less, your transmission's working a little less, and so you're supposed to get a little better gas mileage. And that was really appealing to me because I was getting about 11 to 12 miles per gallon fully loaded with this thing on 4.3 gears. So 4.3 is the ratio that came in this, and I did a 4.9 swap. And so when I did this 2 years ago, I didn't film any of it, but I had a buddy of mine recently who wanted to do that job, and so I filmed the whole thing that we did, and that's what I'm gonna play for you right now. All right, today we're going to do a 4.9 swap on my buddy's, what was it, 2002? 2001 Mitsubishi Montero. So this comes with 4.3 gears from the factory, but there's certain Monteros, it's the 01 and 02 XLS versions that come with 4.9 gears. So these are pulled out of a junkyard. You can see the distinction there, 4.9, and these are 4.9s. And so the goal today is to swap these into this. And the nice thing about the Monteros is you can just drop the whole third member, so this is called the carrier of the third member. You can just put that whole thing in, and it's a direct bolt-on for later Monteros or Monteros that come with a 4.3 gear ratio from the factory. So you don't have to do backlash, you don't have to do gear setting, you have to actually pull the diff apart. You can just swap the whole third member. So we're gonna go through the bolts and the procedures and all the things you're gonna have to move and work with to get them in. And right now we're gonna start on the rear. All right, so now we're under the car, and this is the old 4.3 diff in this Montero. And so as far as stuff as we need to remove here, this is gonna be your CVs. They've got a flange right here, and so you have to take these off right here. For this, it's good to jack up the car so you can rotate the assembly so you can get to the bolts, because there's going to be one on this side and this side. You're going to take off this stabilizer bar or whatever, whatever this thing is. And then you get your drive shaft. Same story as the CV. Up here, you've got the aluminum carrier. That's gonna be, I think those are 22s. It's the easiest way to do it. There's some bolts that are on top that you can take off, but taking off that whole carrier right there is gonna be good. And then in the back, you got your rear diff bushings right here. Those are pretty big, but you gotta get those out. Then the whole thing should drop down. The only complicated part about this is, as you can see right here, there's a bolt and there's a nut here. And when they put it in from the factory, they put this in first and then they add the gas tank. So right here's your gas tank. And as you see, as we pull this out, the bolt's gonna hit the gas tank. The easiest way to do this is take a Sawzall and just cut that bolt in half, and then take your bolt when you put your new diff in and put it in from this side. Then you don't have to play with your gas tank. We'll show that later. We've removed all the bolts from this flange. I think there's maybe 6 of them. And so this is the axle flange, then this is the CV. And then what it's gonna do is as you can see, it's not sitting quite flush anymore. If you jack up the side, right here where the control arm is, go ahead and do that. It'll drop this down enough, and then the CV totally falls out of the way. Now it'd be good to bungee cord this out of the way or something, but this allows you to get at the whole rear diff without having to disassemble any of the hubs or anything like that, which makes this job so much easier. So now we'll repeat the process on this other side and move on to the drive shaft. Moved all these CV bolts, now we're moved on to the drive shaft. The easiest way to do this is if you get your buddy to put the car in neutral, or you put the car in neutral, then you can rotate this drive shaft, then you don't have to fight those bolts. You can get them down low. These are gonna be 14 millimeters right here, and 12 millimeter on the back. This is out, the CVs are out of the way, they're on the side, and now we're in the home stretch, so it's really actually pretty easy from here. Like I mentioned, there's 2 bolts. One's over here, and this guy right here. They're gonna pull down this carrier. And the reason that I do those bolts instead of this bolt is because of this piece right here. I just think you could remove it. I know some people have. I had a really hard time getting it that nut when I did it to drop it down. So we're just gonna pull the whole thing out. The other thing is you got these bolts back here. Those are gonna drop the diff down. And then just for a safety measure, I leave this bar in until the diff is loose. And what it's gonna do is drop the diff down. It's gonna rest on this bar, but it's not gonna fall on you. Then you can kind of position your jack and work the whole thing down. So we're gonna try to get those bolts out right now. And like I said, we're gonna have to cut that one, and I'll show you that in a second. Here's that bolt I was talking about right here. We got this other one loose, fought us a little bit, but we got that one off. And now we're working on this one. You can see it's slid, and it's about halfway through here, but the bolt is hitting the side of the gas tank. And so you can either drop the gas tank, which in a junkyard, sometimes that's an easier option, because you don't care about it. But this is, this is the guy's actual car. We're not trying to break this one. So what we're gonna do is you take a Sawzall and you cut through this bolt. And it's important to have a really good Sawzall blade, something that's plugged in, carbide, whatever, that's gonna cut through there. And if you cut through there, then you can take a punch and you can drive the bolt out the rest of the way. And then, like I said, the key is either to go buy another one of these bolts, use the other side for reference, or when you're at the junkyard and you're pulling this, just grab one of these bolts, these extra ones, and then when you take it to your house, you can throw that in, and you can, like I said, go from the other side and put the nut on this side. That way you don't have this issue in the future. You see what I did is I cut off the end here where the actual bolt head was. And the key is to not hit that brake line. You're awfully close to it, and so you kind of just got to work with what you got. You're close to the gas tank. Take your time, be patient, and then push the bolt out this way. So towards the rear of the vehicle, pull that out. Now that's free. We'll take this one out, undo these bolts here in the rear. I already took that one out. Got to pull this one out. And we'll drop it down. You can see it's already resting on top of this bar. We'll position a jack underneath it, take these off, and slowly lower it out of the car.
Oh yeah, I remember this part.
All right, so we've taken out the bar, and now we've got the flange right here for the drive shaft on the sway bar. And so what's got to happen is this whole diff has got to come towards the driver side, or sorry, the front of the car, and then it's going to drop down. So I've got, my buddy's got his jack underneath this part of the diff. We're going to slide it forward, and then we're going to let it down nice and easy. I can't film it because I can't do this many things with my hands, but that's the basic process: is drop it down, let the flange hit here, slide it backwards, take it out of the car. All right, just like that, diff is out. So here's what we ended up doing is we had to do a little bit of coordinating with the jack and the pry bar. But we had the diff on the sway bar and basically had to move the diff all the way as far this way as we could with this whole assembly above the sway bar. And then when you get it all the way back, it's able to drop down out of its bracketry right here. You lower it down and then pull it this way. So when you put it back in, it'll be the same exact process. We'll get the diff loaded up as far as we can here on the sway bar and then push it up and forward to get into those mounting brackets. So now we've got it out and we're ready to put the new one in. One last thing to remember when you're pulling this out is it does have a diff breather at the top. This goes into the frame, and so we were pulling it down and it started to put a little bit of tension on this. We pulled it out of the frame, but you can also pull it out of the top of the diff. It's good to know, so when you drop it down, make sure you don't snap that. Same procedure to put it in as to take it out, just in reverse. So now we got everything in there. We got the drive shaft bolted up, got it in the back. Honestly, this just takes a lot of wiggling and prying and using a buddy and a jack stand to get, or a jack to get these lined up, to get this to clear these bars. Got this already in, and I got the ones in the back. But now it's time to put in our new bolt. And so over here, like I said, we had the the gas tank clearance issue. So now we're gonna put this bolt in, and we're gonna do it just like we did on the other side, where it's gonna come from the rear of the vehicle and go through. Then we'll put a nut on it, tighten this down, and that will be the diff carrier installed. All we gotta do after that is hook up our CVs, and then we're good to go. All right, just like that, the diff is in. Got the CVs reattached. Pretty easy. Got all the bracketry and bars back in place. It's really, I mean, again, it's just these, drive shaft, this, pretty easy to put back together. And now we're gonna put the wheels on, and we'll at least have the rear installed. Moving on to the front, which is more complicated. But yeah, we'll get into that. Sweet, now we're moved on to the front. New day, new shop, whatever. And we're gonna do the front diff now. So the first key is to jack up the car. You're gonna take off this wheel, and you're gonna take off the other wheel, because you've gotta pull this CV shaft out. So in order to get the CV out, you've gotta take this guy off, take the axle nut off, and separate the ball joint from the upper A-arm. We're gonna pull that out, and there's gonna be some fluid that comes out of there. Then, once we get that out, we'll move to the other side and focus on taking that CV out as well. All right, so now we're under the car, and there's a few things you have to disconnect here before you can drop this diff out. So the first one is gonna be, this is your front four-wheel drive sensor. And there's gonna be a plug that goes up here. You're gonna have to disconnect that. And then you've got vacuum lines for the actual actuation of the four-wheel drive. So there's two there, and then there's two more up there. And I'll just show you those off over here. So you got these two lines right here, one in the front and one in the back. Then you got one here and one up top. So you got these four lines. It's helpful to label these with some tape or something, or do a video of them so that you know where they go back. And here's that sensor that I was talking about. Then, once we're done with that, we gotta take off this CV shaft. So this one, as you can see, just pops right out, no problem. But then as soon as we get those lines disconnected, we'll take the bolts out of this side on this one. That way this can just hang free, and we can drop the diff out. Bolts, just as they are inside, they're gonna be kind of trapped in there. That's how they are on the donor one as well, and undo these nuts. And then you'll pull this off. In order to do that, just support this spindle and then pull the ball joint off, and it'll slide right out. That should give you enough clearance to pull the old one out and put the new one in. All right, so we're almost ready to pull this diff down. As you can see, we loosened this bolt. I went ahead and took this one out. There's only 4 bolts holding this on. So this one's hard to see with the camera, but there's one up there. You can barely see it right there. Oh, that's a better angle. Okay, that one's loosened as well as that guy. And they're all captured nuts. So I've left them all loose so that when we're ready to drop this down, it's a little more controlled. And then the last step is to remove these 4 bolts on the drive shaft. It's gonna be a 14 on this side and a 12 nut. So once you remove that, the whole thing is ready to drop down. You're gonna probably want a buddy, or you can bench press it out, but you just drop the whole thing down, and you can put it next to the other one, and make sure you have all the lines correct. All right, we have swapped out the old diff, and we'll pull the CV axle as well while we were at it. So there's the old diff. We actually got the new diff in. Obviously, I kind of stopped filming there for a second because it's already in, but it's pretty easy. All of the things you did to take it out, you just do the reverse to put it in. So you do the vacuum lines, drive shaft. The easiest way to do it is to take the rear end of the diff right here and position this upward. And so you kind of put it up and at an angle, and you load it onto these back mounting points first. And then you get a bolt through there. You can put the front up, get your vacuum lines attached, get your CVs attached. And then we're putting in oil right now, and it should be ready to go. All right, so that was what we did with my buddies, and it's the same process I did on mine. And so we wrapped that up and we got it on the road, and everything ran flawlessly. Now, there's a few things I want to talk about because I mentioned earlier in this video that the reason I wanted to do this was gas mileage and less wear and tear on my vehicle. And so after doing the 4.9 swap, like I said, this is my favorite modification I've done. The best way to describe it is the vehicle went from feeling like lethargic and big and heavy and slow to feeling nimble and athletic. And it's not a sports car, don't get me wrong, but the 4.9 gears really livened up this thing. I live at elevation about 4,500 feet above sea level, and so it's a little slower from kind of any other place in the world. Like, it would be lower than that, like sea level. So that was really helpful for me. Going up hills, fully loaded, towing a trailer feels great. It also feels great off-roading. It's nice and smooth. And so I really like this. It's a pretty simple mod. I think I did it for less than $200 out the door. Both diffs were 80 bucks a piece. And so it's pretty easy. It's bolt-on. It saves you thousands of dollars over doing this with a different car. We have to pull the gears apart. You have to index them. You got to pay a professional to do it. So I would recommend this for anyone who's looking for a little more advantage. It's super easy to do on these Monteros. And now I could actually run 35-inch tires with this gear ratio, and it'd be like it was stock. Now, I don't want to run 35s, and there's a couple reasons for that, but it's really cool that this is such an easy job to do with such a massive benefit. The last thing I want to mention is gas mileage. This is not a hybrid, this is not an electric car, this is not any kind of like save the planet vehicle, but I went from getting 11 to 12 miles per gallon to getting closer to 14 to 15. And so that's significant for me, and that's really good. It is a little overworked at 80 miles per hour, which is at the top of the highway speeds for me in Montana. But for stuff like getting around at 65, 70, I'm getting almost 17 miles per gallon in that situation. It doesn't overheat off-roading anymore. It's really excellent. So if you're considering a 4.9 swap, head to your local junkyard, pull them out, get a buddy to help you, and swap them in, because it's going to make a huge difference.